Hello and welcome to Advanced Television Academy TV channel once again. This morning we're talking about home networks. It seems to me that over the last 12 months or so, home network has become absolutely front and centre in terms of discussion about how to achieve real convergence for the consumer in their home. However, implementing the network is, as the engineers say, non-trivial. So this morning we have a set of real experts in the area, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot about how that implementation can take place. As is our custom, I'll ask our panellists to introduce themselves. David.
Morning, I'm David Thorne. I work for BT in the recently created Innovate and Design section. It's a technology strategy role. My job title is Broadband and Access Strategy, but the access bit very much extends into the home network, and I've had a lot of experience over the years, both in implementing and standardising home networks.
Neil?
Hello, my name is Neil Foster. I'm the Director of Sales and Business Development at Access. Access is a consumer electronics software company in over 800 million devices. Consumer electronics devices is based in Japan, but obviously a global company, and it's quite exciting because the software is evolving very rapidly in the home networking.
Thank you. John?
Hi, CTO for key accounts with Huawei Technologies. Fundamentally working with a number of top infrastructure vendors and service providers across the European region. Focused on pretty much everything from the mobile phone through to the back-end intelligent platforms. And we're pretty much focused on the strategy of where service providers want to take the networks to, what the home's going to look like, what the end-to-end architecture is going to look like, who we need to partner them with, and what applications we can deliver across this network.
Thank you. Michael?
My name is Michael Weissman. I'm the VP of Marketing for Coppergate Communications. We're a chip company. Our chips enable home networks. We have 3 different classes of chips. One is home P&A, which we're installing at about 20,000 devices every day. The second is home plug products, which we announced last week. And the future and excitement for us is G.HN, which is the new home networking standard. And when the standard is fully ready, which is basically now, we'll start developing and have chipsets next year.
So let's just take a moment to define the home network and what we mean by it, and what we say it must deliver to subscribers. How should it look to the subscriber? David?
Well, its primary requirement, it should actually be completely invisible to the subscriber. It's very much an enabler. So from a service provider point of view, for example, delivering the BT Vision service, what we want to do is to be able to deliver that service to the end user as transparently and easily as possible. So at the moment it tends to be to a single device, but as these applications develop, then there'll be more and more of a need to distribute these programs around the home, and that's where home networking will really come to in its own, but it's got to remain simple, otherwise it simply won't work.
Neil, simplicity?
Yes, it's very, I think the best word was invisible. I think people want seamless, whether it's my parents or my brother or sister or whatever. It needs to be very, very simple. And really, the word simple is too complicated a word. It needs to be ridiculously simple. I mean, you now have video cameras and normal digital cameras, and you have mobile phones, and you have the set-top box, and you have your DVRs as well. And there's so many different consumer electronics items, and they all just need to plug in very simply, preferably no plugging in, just talking all, but you've obviously got to protect that content, you've got to protect the parental rights as well, making sure children can't access other content. You've got to make sure that the original content providers, the actual producers of the content, that content can't be pirated and stolen, and has to be monetizable. So there's many different angles, and it all has to be done in a very simple way. So it is a complex problem, but it is one that we're all obviously working to solve.
So, John, it sounds like simplicity built out of ultimate complexity.
Yeah, I think ultimately the home environment, whatever you put in there, needs to be a platform for the services that we're going to be looking to deliver, not only today and tomorrow, but the day thereafter. Today, we are looking at things like the smart home, the ability for the home to talk to the smart grid, a whole raft of new applications and content providers who are going to sit on the back end of these networks. What we need to do is give access to all of these applications and services within the home. So the platform, although it needs to be simple to the end user, has to have an awful lot of complexity built into it to make it simple.
I said it was non-trivial. It's beginning to sound impossible.
No, it's definitely not impossible. If you look at the electricity grid, the electricity grid enables all sorts of applications. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. We need to enable IP in every device in the home, and we need to do it in a standardized way. And if we do so, like electricity is standardized, then all sorts of applications can be delivered on top of it.
So it's an interesting analogy, and obviously we'll come back to things like power line distribution, but the analogy actually with electricity itself. You know, I plug in a kettle, I plug in a toaster, and they all just kind of work. Let's assume that we accept that IP is the carrier for this, but then what are the options for implementing that network?
Well, there are two main flavours, and there do need to be two main flavours. There's no doubt that from the user experience point of view, then wireless has a lot to offer, in that it gives you basically locational flexibility. So if you want to wander around, sit down, use your laptop or other mobile device, that's very good. However, there are certain applications, in particular, some of the more demanding IP, TV and streaming applications, where wireless may work, but it may not work reliably. So at BT, we've been saying for a long time, the answer is actually a hybrid network. So where wireless will work, that's absolutely fine. Where it won't work, then you need some kind of wired technology. The problem with wired technology is you really don't want to have to install new wires. So there have been a number of what's called reuse or no new wires technology, power line, coax phone line, which have been worked on for a number of years. And the important thing that's happening at the moment is there's the potential convergence of those technologies. If you think back to where wireless was a few years ago, there was basically far too many competing standards and competing non-interoperable standards which actually interfered with each other. So again, we have a great convergence opportunity at the moment with what's been happening recently in Geneva with G.hn to actually bring these together. But it's going to be it will remain a hybrid world going forward where it needs to be.
Neil, do you believe in a hybrid world?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's almost the overused and overabused word at the moment, and it's starting now to be used to cover multiple different disciplines. But yeah, 100% I believe in the word hybrid. My sort of specific version of that is the DLNA hybrid, so that you've got the connectivity. DLNA is quite clearly the standard that is going to tie everything together. It's already in most video cameras and normal photo cameras, and it's now moving into the set-top box, and I think that's been the most astonishing thing this year, is to see it as a almost mandatory requirement in every device going forward now. And this DLNA is going to connect all these different devices from a pluggable software aspect.
Is it? I mean, that's one thing that one finds very quickly as soon as you start looking into home networks, is there's several different kind of gospels according to X. So DLNA, you still have faith, if you like, will be the...
Absolutely. I mean, at the fundamental of DLNA is UPnP, and that is now pretty ubiquitous in terms of consumer electronics devices, and the next versions of DLNA bring a whole set of use cases and capabilities like scheduled recording, remote user interface, and these other technical capabilities, and you only have to look at the use cases that an operator will actually roll out. And DLNA quite clearly forms a standardized way. There's lots of proprietary ways of doing it, and as a software vendor, software vendors like proprietary to a certain extent, but clearly DLNA offers a proper standardized opportunity for a massive capex and operating expenditure reduction for them. So I think we're seeing DLNA. Last year we would have said DLNA was just a nice-to-have option. This year now, it is now becoming a tick box mandatory item in pretty well every consumer electronics device, which surprised us, but it has really changed recently.
We'll come back to the sort of alphabet soup of different standards and where we're going with that. Let's just stay with the network itself for the moment. John, hybrid network, I mean, I did hear somebody a few days ago actually who had an axe to grind, I must say, but he referred to wireless as plug and pray.
I think the hybrid network will continue. People are going to want to be tethered and untethered. There are certain things that are best done on a wired or fiber type network in the home, purely because you need the bandwidth. But I don't think it's settled at the moment. I don't think it's as easy as telco wires within the home or an 802 whatever standard which is wireless. I think there are a number of stakeholders in the industry that have as yet not come in. So today, the telco initiative is very different from what the smart grid is trying to do. I think there needs to be a chat between the two to find out what is the norm. The BBC clearly has its own view of what home networking or a set-top box needs to look like. I think globally there are other demands that need to be taken into account. So I think the standards will change. I'm not sure they're settled at the moment. I think as we move forward and climate change becomes a bigger and bigger issue, the network needs to be smarter to be able to shut down things. So I see the standards evolving over the next couple of years, quite radically in fact.
Michael, wireless, wired, hybrid?
So I agree with David completely. I think that the wired home network is mandatory. There's always more and more applications that demand a bandwidth that exceeds that of wireless. But wireless is here to stay for sure. The customer doesn't care. The customer wants to plug in, whether it's to a wall, to a socket, to any kind of device, and get connected just as easily as when they unplug it, they're on wireless. As it relates to the smart grid, G.HM, which is this forthcoming standard, has applicability in both cases. So it has a wired home network functionality for home entertainment applications, but it also has a smart grid functionality. In the US, about 2 weeks ago, NIST, which is the leading authority of all things smart energy and smart grid in the United States, has approved G.HN as an official NIST smart energy technology. So I think that we will see some convergence of that.
Is it, I mean, just to get this clear, are there, when we're talking about video distribution, does wireless have a place in that, or should that always be part of a kind of a fixed network solution?
Well, again, it depends on the application. I mean, there are certain applications, and I mean, some of these things are real-time streaming, some aren't. A lot of this is actually to do with having a plan B. Again, if you've only got one answer, it doesn't work. As a service provider, if I'm trying to support that, I've got a real problem. So in some cases, wireless will work. In a lot of cases, it probably won't work. But again, one of the problems with wireless that are the actual applications are likely to become more demanding over time as we move to more and more HD, multi-channel, etc., etc. But also, wireless is also to a degree a victim of its own success. Wireless has rightly been very, very popular. Again, for the convenience of not having to plug anything in at all, it's great. But as more and more people use it, then it can essentially interfere with itself. So you get next door neighbor interference. So, there are natural constraints there, which I still think, for the foreseeable future, it is going to be a hybrid solution. But a lot of the power of this is having more than one solution. You don't want an infinity of solutions, and 2 is actually a very good number, 2 types of solution.
Wireless, but only with a health warning, or?
No. It's going to be wired predominantly for these pay applications, because service providers are charging a reasonable amount of money for this, and customers have a very high expectation of quality of service. And in the demanding applications we see around the world, we see as much as 50 megabits of continuous streaming and things like whole home DVR and things like that. Those applications provide no headroom in wireless. It would consume virtually 100% of that bandwidth. So if you're watching an HD video and then you want to do over-the-top web surfing or things like that, you're going to take down your video. And the unfortunate thing is that the service provider is going to get a call. And when the service provider gets 2 or 3 calls, then we're going to get a call. And we don't want to get a call. And they don't want to get a call. So what's going to happen is people are predominantly going to run their application-intensive work over the wired network and keep the bandwidth free for all sorts of other things that are going to happen on wireless. They're both going to happen concurrently, and they're both going to happen for a very long period of time.